All right, so if you're like me and you've bought your brand new F-350 pickup truck and you've maybe had an older one, 2015 or back, you didn't have this issue where if you let your truck idle, like I do on the side of the road because we're working on a fiber project, or you want to leave your dog in it or your mother in it, or for whatever reason, you cranked your car up. And if you're like me, you like for your car to go off when you tell it to, not when it decides to. Well, this brand new 2023, it goes off in 30 minutes unless you tell it not to. And you have to tell it that you don't want it to every time you don't want it to not to. This is so aggravating. You got to go to settings, then you go to vehicle, and then you go to 30-minute max idle. And you notice that it's already blued out. Well, you say, well, David, I can just turn that off. Well, you can, but then let's just say you turn the truck off, and then we turn the truck back on, and we run back in here to vehicle. And look, it's already back on. So that's just so freaking aggravating. It's so dumb because let's say I get out to talk to the guys on the side of the road and I do that and I go, I'm only gonna be here 15 minutes and I'm not, and the truck goes off, then all the upfitter switches don't work and the truck, all my lights don't work, or if I left my dog in here, it's 100 degrees. I told the truck to stay on, it's ridiculous. So I don't wanna do this every time. It's just dumb. So today, I'm gonna tell you how that you can get around it, because if you take it back to Ford and say you buy 4 of these trucks at the same time and say, hey, this is not acceptable, they go, well, you can't do it. And there's even no way to do it in the software, and there's no way to do it unless you order it as an ambulance. And who wants to order a pickup truck shell as an ambulance so that the thing won't go off? So today, we're gonna show you how to fix that problem. There's YouTube videos out there, and you've seen other people do this, where you can go in and they take an upfitter switch and you can move the upfitter switch, and that'll tell the truck not to cut off because they go in and invoke PTO2 mode. And we're gonna talk about PTO2 or mobile PTO mode on this truck, and we're gonna tell you how to do it. But I didn't really like that application. I wanted this truck to function the way all previous trucks have, where if you turn the key on or you push the button, it runs and idles until it runs out of gas or until you tell it to cut off. And I don't wanna have to remember to flip a switch, because if I wanted to remember to flip a switch, I could just go into the display and tell it to shut off, and then it would do it. But I don't want to do it every time. I want it to be automatic. So let me tell you about the solution that I did. The first thing you're going to do is we're going to take this glove box out, which, you notice all I did is pop that little gadget out there, and then it just pops off its hinge. So what I did is I came up with this Altronix, and there's the box. And it's very important because it only uses 3 milliamps when it's standing by. So that's only when the truck is idling and you're waiting the 20 minutes or the 25 minutes, and that'll become apparent in a minute. It's only using 3 milliamps. Then when the truck engages, it only pulls 40 milliamps and engages a relay. And then we take power and we invoke something that Ford calls mobile PTO or PTO2 mode. Now that's kind of important because in PTO1 mode, the truck has to be stationary. You have to set the parking brake. There's a lot of commands or a lot of conditions that have to be met. The temperature of the transmission has to be this and all this, so that if you're using the PTO to like power a bucket truck or something like that, all these conditions have to be met. But you can also use this vehicle to snowplow with, let's say, or there's applications where you want to be able to use the throttle and the gas and drive and be able to utilize the PTO2 mode. And so that's mobile PTO, and we can show you on the bodybuilders from Ford. But what all that does is it raises the idle to 750 RPMs on a gas, and on a diesel it's 100 over whatever the idle is. And this will work on a gas or a diesel. And so it'll automatically, after 20 minutes, or we'll show you how you can set the time. So say you just wait 20 minutes or 25 minutes, or you can sit there and fiddle with it and get it to where it does it at like the 29th minute, and then it does it at 30 minutes where it was shut off. But I just like to use 20 minutes because that's fine, because all it does is it raises the idle, which helps the cooling of the truck anyway. It puts the PTO in a different mode. I mean, it puts the transmission in a different mode where it raises the pressure a little bit, so it pushes more fluid to the cooler. So the truck could sit there and idle indefinitely and it won't hurt anything. And when you go into mobile PTO2 mode, it disables automatically the shutoff, so you don't get the 30-minute shutoff. So that's ideal, and so you don't have to do anything. You just pull up and you're sitting on the side of the road, first 20 minutes, everything's normal. Then at the 20th minute, the truck will jump up 100 RPMs in its idle, and then you won't see any dings, no dash, no nothing. We're not gonna cut any factory wires, we're not gonna do anything, and you can unplug it. but it doesn't hurt your warranty. It doesn't hurt anything because Ford shows you how to do it. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it if you want to do it. And so I always get a little bit aggravated by the people that do these videos and they show you after it's finished. So we've showed you after it's finished. We're going to utilize our spare F350 and we're going to come up here and we're going to take it apart right quick so that I can show you guys how to do it. So we just pull the body molding off right here like this, and then I've already got this popped off so I look like I know what I'm doing. But again, it's just these little clips. You can get them at a auto parts store if you mess up and break one, but just be careful. But you can see, if you pull the body molding off, you can see where they are and you can use one of those little tools. So here's a little quick pro tip. If you don't want to scratch up your finishes and stuff, here's a way. All these clips are going to be in the same place, and it always aggravated me when people do videos, they don't show you. So just pull the body molding back. This will be in here, but you can see where the clips are, and if you don't, have experience doing it, after a while you learn how to just grab it and pull it off. But you can use something like this, and this won't mar your finish because it's plastic and whatever. Then when you get them raised up, here's one from Snap-on, you can get in there and it twists and help relieve the pressure. Here's like a cheap knockoff one that you can buy at any auto parts store. So, sometimes having the right tool just keeps you from messing up what you got. So you pull this guy off, then you reach in here and you get this guy and you get him out. And again, let me just show you where the clips are. It's this clip and this clip here, and the one that returns back into the truck. Pull this base clip up, and then that this one right here is going to be tricky, and then I always check to make sure that the steel clips stayed in place, because now's a good time to find them and know to be in an area, because that's aggravating if you lose them. And then when I do one of these trucks, I do a lot of other things to it and just like to leave everything sitting there. Now, here's another thing that kind of aggravates me about this. Okay, so now when you get to right here, look how this looks like a real typical YouTube video that I watched before. You see this little clip? These goofballs at Ford, they buried all the way back up in here. So let's take the dash out. Now the easy way to take the dash out is you just pull this little, that's the dampening thing that holds the deal. And you push this over and you push this tab over, and then the dash lays down, and then the hinge just snaps out. And look how good I did that, where I didn't even dump the contents out. So then you can put your light up in here so that you can see down in this cavity. But those goofballs at Ford, they took and they buried this connector way off in there. And so it's very aggravating. And so there's a couple ways you can do it. If you want to do it on the cheap, you can go in there and you can bend just a stiff piece of wire and hook it out, because you've got to pull on this connector hard enough to pull one of those push tabs out of a hole that Ford put up under there. You can use a pair of needle nose to go ahead and grab this. I have a long pair of needle nose, those double articulated kind, and I was going to show you, but I couldn't find them. But anyway, so you got to dig this connector out from back in there. Now when you get done, you're just going to leave this connector right there. This connector is where all the magic happens with what we're going to do. So then you can just disconnect this little connector. See, it has a little tab right there in the front, and it unplugs. So see, you're not going to do anything with the Ford truck that they didn't intend for you to do. And if you look on here, it has a little graphics for you. You got the different colors, and they correspond to this. And then you have the different functions that we can get. But this lets you know that the transmission in park is this. So now let's go up and look at the bodybuilder's sheet, and we'll talk about how we learned how to do this. Secret, not a secret, but if you go to Bodybuilders Advisory, you can go to Super Duty, and then you can go into 2023 Bodybuilders, and then I've got it already pulled up right here. So now this is a really nice document. It looks like it's about 105 pages long, and if you go down here to around page 80, it's going to jump in here and it's going to talk about this PTO customer access connector blunt cut description. And that's what this is. And you see they got a nice little pin out, and they show you the rear view. And when they're talking about the rear view, they're talking about looking at it this way. So this is the rear view. Wasn't super intuitive to me, but it has the numbers and the wires, and it corresponds to what it is. And then it starts on page 85. And then this is the mating face view. So here they got the cavities, and they tell you where to do. And then they have different things. So you just be assured that maybe every time, like they have PTO RPM, and they call it PTO RPM, but here they call it PTO ATF signal return, and here they call it PTO return. So you're going to run into some challenges like that. So then the next thing you want to do is what I decided is, after I looked at this particular deal, these application examples they have are more suited if you want to vary the PTO speeds yourself for the traditional PTO 1. So they don't have a lot of descriptions about PTO 2 mode. And in the mobile mode, they do have one here, but they have a bunch of LED lights and other things that we don't need. But anyway, we're going to run through there. So now there's 4 wires that you're going to need in this description. And so let's talk about those for just a second. So when you read right here on blunt cut PTO 2, it says applying vehicle battery voltage. So that's 12 volts. Now let me say something right here, that if you're not comfortable doing this, you probably don't need to do this, because in this connector, this isn't like you good old boy mechanics that come in here and think that they can just start slamming grounds and 12 volts all over the place. Because some of these things are FET, field effect transistors, and they're using the open collector output of the transistor to drag something to ground. Well, if it's expecting to only see a certain amount of current and you put like 12 volts on it that has a bunch of current, all of a sudden you're going to create a problem. So, but this one says that we can apply vehicle voltage, so we can put 12 or 14 volts, you know, whatever the truck voltage is. It signals the transmission to enter mobile mode protocol. It verifies safety enablers. And these are some things like if the transmission's at temperature and all that. These are going to be met if the truck's been driving somewhere and you're going to let it, or they'll certainly meet themselves because of this relay is going to take 20 minutes to invoke. So it'll meet the enablers. It turns off the OBD2 and other emission-related monitoring. Oh, it turns off the OBD2 and other mission-related monitoring. I'm not going to say anything else about that, but wow. And then it invokes the PTO relay circuit when the safety enablers are met. So it'll give you this relay output to let you know the light to come on if you wanted to know it. I didn't care. I just want it to work, and if it works, it works, and I don't need a light to know it. And then listen to this. It says it requires a valid resistance on PTO RPM input system to function. Oh, well, then you think, well, I just run a wire, Dave, to this and you're done. Yeah, not really. So that little interesting tidbit comes back up here, and you look, and at 3 and 5, and I just remember this from doing it. So if you look at number 3 and see it has a diesel number 3 and it has a diesel number 3 for gas, but it's a 5-volt referenced buffered against short to ground or power. So now that's 5 volts that you can use and you don't have to really worry about. And it's used to complete the resistor circuit for engine speed selection. So that's pretty cool. And so then where does it go to? It goes to port 5, blunt cut PTO RPM, and it says requires the addition of a resistor or potentiometer for any SEC. And SEC stands for stationary idle elevated idle control, or PTO mode. So you can use a resistor or potentiometer, and you can select a fixed or variable engine target speed. Well, and it's combined with diesel PTO ref or diesel PTO and gas, and the speed range available is 9,000 to 3,000, and it's 700 RPM for split staff operation. Now, we don't care about any of that, because in a minute we're going to find out that if you just invoke any of the valid resistance for that, it will work, because PTO 2 mode goes to a fixed idle speed of 750 for gas, and we'll look and see what the diesel ones are. So that's pretty interesting. So now we have to find pins 3 and 5, which I've done this a couple of times, and it's this outside pin and it's this inside pin, so number 3, 4, and 5, and you just build a resistor between it. And you go, well, what resistor, Dave? Well, you go to this page, 91, and they tell you PTO input voltage range. Now, all you people that went to school and care about this, you know, E equals IR. So the voltage is equal to the current times the resistance, and it gives you a voltage. So now they told us already it's 5 volts, and what resistor you get what voltage it is. So what I do is I just, and it can be any resistor from 73,000 or 73K all the way down to 400K, because they have an inbound and out of bound voltage range they're looking for. So they're looking for like 0.4 to 4.5 volts. So I usually just stick a 1K resistor in there, because that's like the super common resistor. And 1K resistor, ironically, will give you 2,200 RPM on the engine RPM. It limits the speed of the truck to 6,000. But again, we're not going to do it, because when you look right here, it says mobile PTO engine-based idle speed minimum 750. So it's just gonna jump the truck, and these gas engines, that's the ones I've done, they jump up to like 600, they're at 600, 650, and they jump to 750. So it doesn't matter what resistor. But for this to work, you have to put the resistor in here. So then you build the resistor there. So as I was building it, and remember when we started talking about the Altronix relay, it only pulls 40 milliamps. So then we go back up here and we're gonna read about this. And then I said, well, what would be great? It'd be great if it's in neutral. No, I don't want to put my truck in neutral. What do I do when I park it? I put it in park. So these lovely people at Ford provided us this. And it is, let's see if I can find it, customer accessory from the PCM or the controller for park. So all of a sudden it says an output from the PCM that indicates when the transmission range sensor indicating the transmission in park position. The low side driver, FET, when they hear low side driver, think transistor, because they're using an open collector transistor to pull something to ground. So they said the low side driver, 160 milliamps max. Okay, now let's talk about 160 milliamps. So 160 milliamps is 160 thousandths of 1 amp. Now remember when we were talking about 12 volts and voltage and all kinds of things? If you were to use a 1 amp fuse in a 12 volt circuit, and let's just say it's 12 volts, that's 12 watts. And if you just move this 160 up to 200 milliamps, 1 amp fuse has 60 times more power than it needs to destroy this input. So if you're not comfortable doing this, this is where you want to stop. But anyway, it has a ground output. So this thing is going to pull to ground when the truck goes into park. And when I first started doing this, I'm like, oh, I need a low side driver and everything. And then I looked at the Altronix board, and it only uses 4 milliamps when it's sitting there, and it only uses 40 milliamps when it switches on the relay. And I'm like, holy cow, I can just use that input to power the whole resistor to make this work. So that's really cool. So let me read the rest of this to you. It says the low side driver will pull this output to ground when active, i.e. the transmission is in park. To properly reference this input, the customer supplied external controller needs to pull this up with a 680 ohm resistor. That's output active, so this voltage will be at 0 volts. So now what they're doing there, if you had a controller that was just watching for this voltage to do this, they're talking about using that 680 ohm resistor, pulling it to ground or pulling it high so that it just sits there and it floats up, and then when it grounds that you could see this natural range because it would wash away. Well, the nice thing about this relay box is it's pulling a little bit of power to itself going to ground all the time. And so as it's floating, you know, we don't care what it floats at because it needs this 4 milliamps to be active. And so that'll more than take care of the 680 ohm resistor, so you don't need that. And so when this output is active, the voltage will be 0 volts. So all they're doing is they're using the open collector output of that FET to pull us to ground. Well, it's actually not. It could be a field effects transistor. So it's pulling it to ground. And so that's where the Altronix relay comes in. And let's talk about that now. I was going to get like a low side driver and go, well, I've only got 160 milliamps to work with. And then I noticed that this lovely relay board from Altronix, and you can get this for like 25 bucks. And Stephen may get you an affiliate link or whatever. If we have one, use it, because then we get some of your money if you go buy something. But I don't care if you use it or not. Okay, so then you get, this thing's about $25 and $21, $30, whatever. I'm in the alarm business when I first started, and we use these for a lot of different things like exit delay controls and whatnot. It's a really nice little relay. It'll let you pick with the switch, and you can go from 1 second to 60 seconds or from 1 minute to 60 minutes. And if you want to be like super precise and you're one of those guys, well, I only want to invoke it at 28 minutes, well, you can put it on the second side and you can sit here and play with it by powering it up and down. And if you get it to go to exactly 28 seconds by just rotating this little potentiometer, then you can, you know, if you get it exactly to 16 seconds, if you flip it, you'll get it to exactly 16 minutes. So, I mean, it's aggravating, but you can do it. And this little LED light comes on when it's invoked. So all we do is then you have to, and you can trust me on this, or you can go read this piece of paper and tell, but you see right here it says, cut J3 for reset on power up. So we're gonna cut that little jumper because we want this thing, every time the truck goes into park, we want this relay to start counting to 20 minutes. And again, 20 minutes is what I use because I want it to come on 10 minutes ahead of when the truck is going to cut off. So I just set it to 20 minutes. You can set it to whatever you want to. You can set it to 5. You can set it to anything under 30. Now, if you set it to 30 minutes and 15 seconds, the truck's going to cut off because this relay's not going to have time. It's going to lose power and it's going to go off. So anyway, so what I usually do is just so you do it, and I've done enough of these, I do a little trick like this, and I know that right there is about 20 minutes. I draw me a vertical line after I get it calibrated. I write a 20 on here for 20 minutes. Then I make a little mark up and down here because, you know, if you get this from me and it got turned, then you can just turn it to the vertical mark. And if you let the arrow, see there's the arrow right there. If you let it come to about right there, see they put a 45 minute, a 60 minute, a 1 minute, a 1 second, 60 seconds, or minutes, whichever. You can pick, and right there is about 20 minutes. And I've done it enough, that'll be 20 minutes. And then your relay control, and this is easy too because they're just back and forth. I could explain to you why relay control goes this way and trigger control goes this way, because I want to invoke the trigger. I want the relay to energize as soon as I want it to only energize as the end of the time runs out. So as soon as it sees power here, I want it to start counting the time. And then when the time happens, I want the relay to energize after the 20 minutes. And so then the relay will trip and latch, and it'll just stay latched until you turn the truck off. And then if you turn the truck off or you shift it out of park, because if you touch the brake or do anything, it defeats that 30-minute thing. And so if you put it in drive, you put it in neutral, you put it in reverse, this whole time starts all over again. And so if you can just remember that it's a 12-volt truck and you put dip switch 3 that way, and then you just alternate them back and forth, that is how the relay needs to be set up. Now, you can read this little book and you can figure that out for yourself, but that's just an easy way. Just zigzag them back and forth, and then the only one you'll ever want to swap if you want to calibrate the time precisely is you can go from seconds to minutes. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward. So now, all we have to do is this little gadget, so we've got it where it'll trigger, so we take 12 volts. Now that's important because Ford, in their wisdom, inside this same thing, they have something on here, they call it upfitter switch. To me, that's not intuitive, but upfitter switch is a 5 amp, 12 volt power supply. So let me see if I can read it where it is. Yeah. So it says right here, they call it run start 5 amp fuse 17. On here, they call it upfitter because they take it from the upfitter box in the truck, but it's a 12 amp, 5 amp fuse intended for PTO use. So you can take that 12 volts and you can run it to the plus, okay? And then when you run the 12 volts to the plus, and I'll show you this in a little bit, you can just go ahead and jump the 12 volts out to the trigger, and you can jump 12 volts out to the common. So we're using that same 12 volts to power this relay, and the only thing we're going to use this power for is remember to invoke PTO2. It says apply truck voltage to that pin, and so that's where we're getting it from, and we're going to get it from the normally open connector because it's normally open until it engages. And you know, there's all kinds of ways to think about relays, but for this relay board, normally open means that the light's not on. When the light's on, normally open gets power from common. And so then we send that to that pin. And then, so we have the trigger, all 3 of these are bonded together, common, positive, and trigger. And then we take that ground, remember that ground we were talking about, back over here to to transmission in park. When the transmission range sensor is indicating park, which is pin 13, and that's it. So you have 4 wires that you hook up. You have to hook up the 2 resistors, so that's 2, and then you have to hook up the ground that you're picking up from the park indicator because that's how we're switching. We're switching to ground, and then we just lay 12 volts on it. Anytime the truck goes into accessory run position, you get 12 volts here. And then the minute it sees the truck crank up and it's sitting in park, this thing starts counting time. As soon as it gets to 20 minutes, if it's set like this relay comes on. As soon as the relay comes on, it takes 12 volts from the common terminal and it hands it out to the normally open terminal that you send over here to PTO2 on pin 8. And then your truck will never turn off. So that's all there is to it. And Stephen's already got a shot of that truck with it installed. Now you can look at it and see how we did it. And if you are not comfortable making this harness, if you send me this harness after you dig it out of your truck, this connector, and Ford wants like 30 bucks for this, or maybe your dealership likes you better, maybe it was 17. And you can do this all the way back to 2019, I think, and it's a different harness. It actually looks like this, but it's the same idea. And it has different pinouts, it has different things, but it's basically the same deal. They call it PTO1, PTO2, and you do the same thing, except a truck before 2023 looks like this, and this was the first year you ever had to do it, so I don't know how far it goes back. I'm not a car guy. So I know the 2019 trucks that had a key, they didn't turn off. The 2019 trucks that were like a Lariat package or upgraded that had a push button, they turned off. So whenever they started turning off with the key, they didn't turn off, but the ones with the button did. So if you send me either one of these connectors, I will create this little deal for you. I'll put a little piece of wire, we'll solder them together, we'll heat shrink them, we'll tape it back up, and for $200, if you send me this and $200, I'll build you one of these. You get it back, I'll send you 4 zip ties, you plug it up, I'll send you 8 zip ties. You'll plug it up and you put it in your truck and it'll work, and I'll test it on either one of them because I have both trucks and make sure they work. And then that way you don't have to worry about, you know, messing up, because if you were to, you'll mess up the output of that open collector transistor if you hook 12 volts up to it, because it'll try to pull that to ground and it's not a sufficient amount of current to break the 5 amp switch, because the 5 amp fuse is 300 times more energy than it needs to burn that up. So you don't want to be doing that. Again, you can go to Bodybuilders on Ford. You can look up all this information. There's no real secret, but if you send me yours and $200, I'll build you the whole thing and tape it up. And yes, I'm making $175. It's not worth it. I'm telling you exactly how to do it. I've done this a couple of different ways. So there's enough room right here in the kick panel that I have just made that relay board up with those 4 wires, because remember, all the wires are connected right here. It's only 3 actually. You got ground, power, and the PTO2 mode. And then you can just, you know, plug this guy back in and it can just dangle in here, and then you put the kick pad back together and that little relay module can sit there. But I think a better way of doing it is the way that we showed you in the other truck, is that you make a little pigtail about 3 feet long, and it comes out, it runs up into here. And then there's some spare things that Ford's put in here that you can see that we just zip tie it to, and you can just zip tie the module behind the dash. And say you wanted to change the time or something, you don't have to take anything apart. You can just let this one dampening thing off of the glove box come down. You can reach in there and you can adjust the time, and you can sit in the driver's seat and have somebody sit here and adjust it, and you can get the chime precisely the way you want it. So it's kind of a fun way to do it. So if you want me to build one of these for you, I'll build it for you for $200, and all you have to do is send me $200, and you send me your plug. You mail me your plug, mail me $200, and I'll make you one, tape it all up, solder it all up, test it. And if you send me this plug, I'll test it on the 2019 truck. And if you send me this plug, I'll test it on the 2023 truck. And the pinouts, even though on the bodybuilder sheet, you'll notice they say they're different for diesel and gas, but the pinouts are in exactly the same place. So I don't even care if it's a diesel or a gas truck, because it'll work out the same. And so one of the things that I'd like for you guys to help us do is, we're kind of new to this YouTube. Our main thing is that we do on the YouTube is we chase hurricanes for Motorola, and we've been trying to gain that, but we'd like to get a couple more subscribers. So we only have like 700 subscribers right now. So what'll be kind of fun is, let's say, what do you think, Stephen, for the next 2 weeks, if you subscribe, or if you send this video to somebody and they subscribe, and we see that you subscribed in the comments with your email address, your YouTube handle, we're going to pick somebody and we're going to give one of these to them. So we'll give you a $200 free connector that we make up and send it to you, and all you have to do is subscribe. And there's only, we only have 700 subscribers, and so if we get 30 people, you got a 1 in 30 chance to do it. Or we've given you enough information, you can go to the bodybuilders thing and you can figure it out. And yeah, it seems like a lot of money, but I'm gonna make each one of these up for you. I'm gonna solder them, I'm gonna heat shrink them back, and I'm gonna try it on a 2023 truck and a 2019 truck, or whichever connector you send me. We'll verify they work and we'll send them back to you, and you'll be good to go. So subscribe, win you a free connector. Now your truck won't go dead, and your dog won't die, and your mama will be happy. Or more importantly, you don't get rear-ended because your emergency warning lights quit working because Ford decides that your truck needs to cut off after 30 minutes. And I don't want my truck to do anything that I don't tell it to. I don't think you do either. Subscribe and have fun.